Call the meeting to order. The Village of Sayward respectfully acknowledges that the land we are gathered on is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nations, the traditional keepers of this land. Call the meeting to order. Public input. We have none. Introduction of late items. Is everybody good with the agenda?
Yep.
Minutes of previous. Petition and delegations. Now, I assume that we're going to go with Ms. Pringle first, or is there a different time for? Oh, the auditors? Okay. Okay. Just, you guys want to just run with the auditor first and then Agip? Okay. So we got Derek Lamb and Travis Sapella, thank you. Audit team from Chad Bosad Boats to present the 22 audited financial statement and audited financial reports. Please, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having us here. Travis will quickly take you through the audit finance report, which you see in front of you there, and then I'll go through the financial statement. And take any questions at the end or anytime. We're here at your leisure. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's
working. I was moving at the same time.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into the audit findings report. The first page is the audit status. So that as of the date of this report, which was today, May 9th, we've completed the audit of the financial statements, with the only outstanding items is Mayor and Council's approval of the financial statements, and obtaining a signed management representation letter and approval of the unadjusted journal entries. Moving on, the next page, we talk about significant audit matters and audit and accounting matters. Significant to most municipalities is your tangible capital assets. So during the year, the village purchased $231,000 worth of tangible capital assets relating to your Newcastle Dam decommissioning and the weir installation. At the end of the year, this project was fully completed. The village spent $11,500 on the building camera system. You guys spent $115,000 to purchase 301 McMillan Drive for your drainage plan. And continuing over from last year, you spent another $85,000 to complete the lift station generator installation. As part of our audit procedures, we review all the invoices and supporting documentations to verify that your amounts are reported correctly and appropriately capitalized. We also review operating expense accounts to identify any possible capital assets that have been expensed. And we discuss with management to assess if there's any indications of impairments of capital assets. As a result of those procedures, we proposed adjustments to record capital assets identified in expense accounts, and we did not identify any significant control deficiencies as a result of our procedures. The next page that we wanted to touch on is the deferred internet revenues. These revenues relate to the lease agreement between the Village of Sayward, Comox Strathcona Regional District, and Sayward Valley Communications. At the date of this report, this agreement is no longer in effect. Sayward Valley Communications has sold its customers to a third party, and the agreement has ended. These amounts were collected, are restricted for use for equipment upgrades. And at the conclusion of the contract, should be repaid to the original funders. In the current year, the village did not collect any amounts owed to it for equipment rental, and deferred internet revenues totaled $62,595 at December 31st. We reviewed the agreements for the ownership of the equipment and the lease of the equipment, and we discussed the details of and the agreements in advance with management. The village has not identified what will occur with the internet assets and equipment owned by it, or whether a new lease agreement will be signed with the third party who purchased the customers from Sayward Valley Communications. As a result of these procedures, we proposed an uncorrected journal entry to recognize the portion of deferred revenues that would be repayable to the original funders, and the portion that would be recognized as village's revenue on the expiry of the agreement. We also, no significant control deficiencies were identified as a result of the above. On our next page, we talk about the qualitative aspects of accounting practices, specifically talking about the village's significant accounting policies and estimates. The village has not changed any of its significant accounting policies during the year, and the accounting estimates, significant estimates, are disclosed in note 1 of the financial statements. We have found no basis on which to disagree with management's estimates. Misstatements. So for audit purposes, we had a materiality of $44,000 and a trivial threshold of $2,200. Under this amount, we would not investigate any discrepancies any further. We identified an uncorrected misstatement, which is attached to the management representation letter at the back of your package. And control deficiencies. So as your auditors, we're required to obtain an understanding of internal controls, and we perform a walkthrough to ensure that they are operating as intended. We did identify other than significant internal control deficiencies. I won't go into them unless you guys have any specific questions. They are documented at the back of your package in the appendices, and they are just best practices and recommendations moving forward. At the back of your appendices, you'll see our draft auditor's report, management letter, representation letter, and the uncorrected audit differences.
How are we doing for 8 minutes here? We good? Good, okay. I'll wrap it up here if there's no questions for Travis. I'll take you right into the audited financial statements. So let everybody flip to those. So, front of them. So I'm going to jump right to the audit report, which is page number, not number, there's going to be a footer on it once we issue it, but it's right after page number 2. So you'll see independent audit report at the top of it. This is for us probably one of the most significant part of your audit, and why that is under the opinion paragraph, you'll see it notes it's a clean audit opinion. We found no reason with which to disagree with any of the amounts presented within these financial statements. So we are issuing a clean audit opinion for the Village of Sayward. Of course, if you approve the financial statements. I'll jump now down. I'm just going to go through some of the key items in the audit financial statements and touch on them. Certainly, a lot of you guys are familiar with them, but at a high level, just to go over some of them, cash, you'll notice, is down significantly from the prior year. It went from 1.06 million to 578,000. And that's really just due to what Travis talked about there, the capital additions. So you had significant spending, $482,000 spent on capital additions during the year that depleted your cash. Now, some of that cash, though, is sitting in accounts receivable. You essentially spent money and then applied for the funding for it. For example, in accounts receivable, that 417,000 that you see below, 190,000 is coming back with respect to the Newcastle Dam project, and 114,000 is coming back from UBCM. And for us, we see that amount being paid after year end, so we're very comfortable with that being presented as a receivable. Certainly, if it was outstanding for 180 days, we might say, at least what's going on here? Is it not been approved? What's the issue? But the fact that it's one from government sources and two has been paid after year end provides us comfort that that number that you see there presented is accurate. So it's important to take, I guess, the context of the decrease in cash with the context that also that there's receivable and money coming after year end. The MFA, the portfolio investments, the 42,000 that you see there, that's very easy for us for audit purposes. That's sitting with MFA BC and collecting interest. A small amount. But the other item too, and just to point out that the village has done and a lot of communities has done, you have a high interest operating account with CIBC. So you're collecting 4.3% on that cash balance there. So it's certainly being put to good use by sitting there. You don't need to go out and buy a GIC. It's probably collecting more than some GICs you would actually get. So you'll see it when I go to the income statement, but you'll notice that your interest revenue is up significantly this year. And we're seeing that in all communities because of interest rates are so high right now. So in terms of accounts payable, liabilities, I'm not going to touch on accounts payable. That's you notice the numbers almost identical to the prior year. That's pure coincidence. Accounts payable is just timing of when the invoices are paid. There's nothing unique or unusual in there. Deferred revenue, and Travis touched on it. The biggest item in that deferred revenue number is $62,000 for the internet fees. Whether it should be paid back to the original funders, essentially, it's not your money legally by the agreement. Certainly, you could take it into revenue or take it as your money, but we're showing it as deferred revenue, almost like a liability at your end. It is a liability at your end because you haven't earned it as a community. The other big item in there this year is approximately $41,000, excuse me, for the Climate Action Initiative. So the village received $41,000 to take. It's fairly broad, but there is specific restrictions on it, which is why it's sitting in deferred revenue. It can only be used for climate-related work. So $41,000 is sitting in that $122,000 for future program deliverables for projects. Excuse me. The long-term debt, that is all sitting with MFA BC. It's very small in terms of interest rates. You might say, hey, we have this cash sitting there. Why don't we just pay off the debt? Your interest on the debt is 0.9 to 3.8%, and you're making 4.3% on your bank account. So you're actually making money by having debt. So not that you necessarily could pay that off right away, but if you wanted to, it wouldn't be prudent as you're making more on your cash than you are paying on the debt. So that's what's sitting in there, and that's just 3 different loans that you have. One for a truck, one for water, and one for sewer, and they should be primarily completed in the next few years. Non-financial assets, tangible capital assets. Travis already talked about it, and I talked about the major capital additions there, the 482,000. So you see an increase. Why the increase isn't exactly 482,000 is that you also had amortization during the year of just over $200,000, which I'll get to here momentarily. So that amortization is the recognition of the expense of the assets over their estimated life. Jump to the next page, which is the statement of operations. I won't go through each line here. For us, like taxation revenue is fairly straightforward. You have X number of buildings, houses, times tax rate equals revenue. Like that's what it should be. So the risk for us for audit is very small on taxation revenue. Where the risk lies more is on user fees and expenses. You don't want to harbor a marina, so that makes it much easier. Those are always difficult areas to audit because of the nature of them. But just touching on some of the unique items on the statement of operations here. You'll notice under, and this is one we spoke with Lisa about, mainly just budget to actual. So if you look at government grants and transfers and say, hey, why is that down so much? Because that affects your annual surplus at the bottom. You had budgeted for receiving grants for fire equipment that wasn't received during the year. So that's why that's down so much from the budget. It's not that something wasn't done, it just wasn't received at year end. You notice investment in other income, I already touched on it, but it's up from 32,000 to 45,000. Approximately 20,000 of that is just interest from the bank account. So certainly being put to good use there. In terms of expenses, I'll touch on just quickly 2 of them. Recreation and park services. You notice 2021 is the COVID or part of a COVID year, and so you had a full year of operations of your recreation services this past year. So both salaries and utilities related to them were up, which is why you see the increase from 252 to 339, an $80,000 increase. As well as if you look down below, right below that, in terms of protection services, you'll say, hey, it was 247 last year versus 113 this year. Last year, you had $152,000 spent on flood plain mapping and work, and this year you don't have a similar expense. So it's not necessarily that something was cut aggressively. It just you had funding for something that wasn't there this year that was done the previous year. At the bottom, and again, this is something I just want to add context because without it, it can be somewhat deceiving. you'll see there's an annual deficit of $216,000. That the village didn't lose $216,000 this year. And you might say, well, why does it say that? So for accounting, we recognize amortization, which is the cost of your sewers, the cost of your equipment, things that are 40, 50 years old over their life. And so in that number is $227,000, if I can read my writing, of amortization. So if you back that out, if you're a business or if you're a village, if you take out that $227,000 of amortization, you have a small, very small operating surplus. And so you're essentially break even, which, I mean, some people would like to have a big surplus, but as a village, you're not operating at a deficit. It's just deceiving because it shows that because of an accounting entry of recognizing sewers and buildings and everything that was paid for 20 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. So just want to add, I think that's very important context when looking at this. And one item I'll just touch on, and it's, I think a few years ago we talked about this, the cash flow statement. So if you flip to page number 7, and I don't normally talk about cash flow statements, but just again to add context to that operating deficit. The cash flow statement shows you your cash, where your cash comes from and where it goes, but succinctly. And your cash flows from operating. So from operating the village, you had a small cash surplus of $20,000 this past year. So again, I think this does a really good job of illustrating that you're not operating at that deficit that it says that you're operating at. It's not negative. And then you obviously see that massive relative to the size of the village, large amount of purchase of tangible capital assets. In terms of the notes, they're fairly consistent with last year. I just want to point out a few just for those who may be interested. Note number 6 on page number 11, my eyes serve me right, discusses the long-term debt of the village and describes the repayment terms of it. I've already touched on those, but just if I flew by too fast or you want to go back to it, it does describe the interest rates being paid on the debt as well as the expected repayment dates of that associated debt. And then the other item I just quickly touch on, let's fly through here, is your accumulated surplus. Note number 14 at the bottom, or sorry, note number 11 at the bottom of page 14, excuse me. And you'll see the majority of your accumulated surplus, which for a business, it would be your retained earnings. Essentially, if you were to sell everything in the village tomorrow, which obviously is not ever going to happen, but and pay off all your debts, you'd be left with $11.7 million. That's essentially your accumulated surplus. The majority of that is your property and equipment, your sewer, your water, everything like that. Up above, you see your unappropriated surplus. So it's essentially items that aren't restricted either by statutory reserve or other reserves, internal reserves. And you'll see that the unappropriated surplus general is down a bit, as are the other reserves slightly. So that's sort of what makes up the accumulated wealth of the community. Lastly, I'll touch on this last item here. And you guys are doing, I was talking to Lisa about this before it started here, but we work with every community north of Campbell River. And so every community is sort of different in how they're treating this. That you received a significant amount of COVID money, $268,000 during COVID that was supposed to be used for COVID related things. A lot of communities have struggled with what does that mean? Because now we're sort of out of it and you have this cash. But you guys are doing a good job in terms of allocating it out. Some communities still have the original amount sitting there. When I say sitting there, it's still, your cash is blended, but you have to report, you're required to report to the province on the schedule. They're requiring the schedule saying, how are you spending this money? And so you've done a good job of allocating it out to various equipment upgrades within here, grant writing, various other costs. So this is a report that the province requires that hopefully will go away in a few years from now. So with that, that's it for the financial statements. Again, I sincerely appreciate, myself and Travis and CNB appreciate you having us here, as well as the opportunity to work with yourselves. We want to thank Lisa and the team here as well. It's a very clean and smooth audit. You have finding a good CFO is a challenge. So I appreciate all the help. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here. Council, do you have any questions? Nope. And thank you to the CFO and staff. Excellent job. Thank you.
guys.
Hey, So recommended resolution that council receive the 2022 audited financial statement and audited finding report for information and discussion, and that the Village of Sabre 2022 audited financial statement be approved.
I'll move that.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Perfect. Again, thank you very much. Okay, you have a safe trip home.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the sun.
Yeah, we will, thank you.
Okay, B, we have Aggie Pringle, Oscar Days Committee, request for support. You betcha.
For those of you who don't know me, Aggie Frindle, I'm just to be completely clear, I'm here tonight as a representative of the Oscar Days Committee, and none of my job or any other of my volunteer positions come into play tonight. This is just as Oscar Days Committee. And I sent a letter some time ago that I think you have before you, requesting assistance with getting the Oscar Days tournament running this year. We've asked for use of the ball fields. We've asked for use with a reduced payment for the village campground, and we have asked for use for shower purposes for the Kelsey Center for that weekend. And I'm here basically to answer any questions that you may have. Historically speaking, like the tournament goes back, the earliest date I can find for it is 1966. So it's been around in one way, shape, or form with a few breaks here and there for COVID, and it was shut down for a few years for various and assorted reasons. But it's been around a long time, and it's always benefited this community. The proceeds from last year's tournament went to the clinic, went to Wounded Warrior Run, which benefits the fire department as they are in partnership with Wounded Warrior, and get their programs free of charge with that partnership, and also went to the Secret Santa and help some families in need at Christmas time. So it does benefit the community in that way. Also benefits the community in the way that local benefits or businesses benefit as well. Fisher Boy, all of the co-op store, all of the lodging places are typically full for that entire weekend. And basically, I'm just here to answer any questions that you may have, any concerns that have been brought forward.
So, who has a question? Councilor Burchett?
Yeah, what were you looking at for reduced camping fees with regards to that?
Last year, what we agreed to was $20 per team for the duration of the weekend, like per evening per team for the duration of the weekend. So $60 per team, basically. And there'll be anywhere from 12 to 16 teams.
Thank you.
Councilor Paulson?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Aggie, when you say teams, like one campsite per team?
They do try and crowd into one campsite. Sometimes they'll take two. Yeah. And some don't stay here at all.
I recall several years ago that the campsites were absolutely jam-packed with people, and I seem to think that the last one before COVID, I think, was reduced to having one vehicle per, or one RV per campsite. Was that correct? Because I think we have 25 campsites.
I don't recall what
Yeah,
the
okay.
spread was that year, but it was, yes, very full. The Port Hardy team typically camps down around the totem. They don't actually use the site.
Councilor Tinsley?
I just wanted to ask about, so for the noise bylaw variation, how important, like 1 AM to me seems reasonable for both nights. I'm trying to understand the request to go to 2 AM. And as you're probably aware, we've had, like on other, we've had noise, shall we say, well beyond that. In some cases, residents have complained about that. So Wouldn't it be more logical just to have one time, like 1 AM seems reasonable, especially if you're gonna get up and play baseball first thing in the morning?
The level of intoxication the next morning is usually still quite high.
Yes,
We're open to amendment to 1 AM as well. It's not, the 2 AM was suggested as by the team as a starting point, but 1 AM is certainly feasible.
okay, thank you. I guess my suggestion would be, I believe that just the one time, everyone knows the one time, and that 1 AM is more than enough time for the noise bylaw to then kick back in. That's my suggestion. Thanks.
Councillor Gilkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tom, or Councillor Tinsley, are you talking about the same kind of one that was approved last year from 12 AM on the Friday, 1 AM on Saturday, and 1 AM on Sunday?
Oh, I see, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's actually earlier on the Friday.
It was, yes. Typically, most of the teams are here, but typically they don't get into being loud until the Saturday night. And then the Sunday night again is more subdued.
Right. So,
Somewhat.
yeah. Well, so thanks for pointing that out, Councillor Gilkin. I missed that sheet. So that was even more conservative than what we have here. But I guess my suggestion would be just one time for each night. The 1 AM time would keep everyone happy. It's a compromise between the two. And also, I find that when you have one message of one time, there's no confusion. That's my thoughts.
Anybody else? Councillor Paulson?
Thank you. One more question about the dance and the possibility of an organization putting it on. Do you have any sort of links to some that might put it on?
Yes, I heard from Mrs. Audrey Ordano this
Yeah.
afternoon. She has asked she's going to be asking you guys if she could use the Kelsey Center for the Saturday evening in hopes of putting on a dance in benefit of the Parent Advisory Committee.
Okay. And so,
The Oscar Days Committee is no way involved with the dance.
Yeah.
We will not be involving ourselves. There's not enough of us to be involved with the dance.
Yeah.
So that would be completely under the PACs.
and so, I remember the last year there was a public sound system set up down at the end of below Ambleside, and that was part of the problem that went on for late into the early morning. And is there any way to control that, or to is that something that you expect to happen again this year if there is no dance, or even if there is a dance?
I suspect it'll happen either way. It has happened the last couple of tournaments. But what we can control is that they shut it down by the end of the bylaw. And we can do that. And we will be meeting with the RCMP prior to the weekend
Mhm.
to make sure that those things are in place prior to the
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah.
Because I agree that wasn't acceptable.
Thanks.
So is there people from the committee that are going to be on site during the tournament?
Yes, myself, Barb Hubbard and Grant Hubbard will be on site for the duration for when all the games are being played. And some
And
of
in
us
the
will,
evening?
and in the evening, Marina Williams, who's a committee member, will also be around for the duration of the tournament. And after that, it'll be kind of as needed basis. If things are getting out of control, we'll come down and assist with the assistance to the RCMP. And if somebody's not going to follow the rules or the law, then they will be leaving.
Okay. Porta pods.
Yes, well, the tournament does provide those at
But they-
at the tournament expense.
Okay. And do they put them over by the totem as well?
No, they have been right at the ball field, but we can divide. We could put 2 at the ball field and 2 at the totem if you'd prefer.
And one of the complaints that was talked about before is people not having access during the camping to, and then using
Whatever they have, yeah. The great outdoors.
pond in people's yards.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Right,
that's,
we weren't aware of that one, so but we can put in more porta potties down the other end.
okay, perfect.
And there is a bathroom that most of the teams weren't aware of behind the B, on the Ambleside side ball field, which we call field B. There is actually a bathroom in there, but I don't know if anybody's aware of it.
Okay. Do you remember how much money the tournament made last year that was divided into all the groups?
It was a little over $2,000. That's net, back when everything's.
Okay. Any other additional, Councillor Bichette?
Yeah, thank you for coming. I think this event is great. It was really lively last year, and personally, I don't have any concerns about the noise bylaw, even at 2 a.m. You're all well behaved last year. The RCMP had it quite under control. I live in the Sabre Towers, and we're right there. And it wasn't that inconvenience. It actually gave some liveliness to Sayward, and it made it feel alive. And it was a great event. So you have my full support. Thank you for coming.
Anybody else? Everybody's good? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming down. Feel better.
Nobody ever does.
Yeah. Okay, so we want to address that now, or do we want to address that on a later date? CAO?
Well, you've received correspondence from them, which includes a request, so you could address that tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So council, thoughts? Concerns? Councillor Bichette?
Yeah, I put a motion that we accept the 2 a.m. Noise bylaw as written in their ask.
Do we have a second on that
I'll second that.
for 2 a.m.? Okay. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? I think 2 a.m. is.
Carried.
Yep, motion's carried. Okay, so, but we also have to. Councillor Paulson?
I'd also like to discuss the use of the campsites and the number of families or groups that are at the sites. Like, because we have 25 sites and 16 teams.
That's the most we can do, 16.
16. And so I think that's one of the things we need to discuss, whether, and the people that go over to by the totem, whether they're required to pay the camp fees too. It's just like tenting, even though there's no, the only thing that's available is washrooms. And they have to come over to the washrooms at the campsite for,
Do they not
What?
pay?
I don't know. That's
don't
just
know.
what I'm talking about.
I don't know either. Councillor Tinsley, do you know?
I believe my understanding of the whole concept here is we're not really actually worried about sites. We're doing a group deal, which is at 16 teams at whatever the number was of 12 people per team, 16 teams. It works out. So it's about $20 per team per night. And then times 3 nights. So I worked it out to about $720 altogether. Does that match? It's a group deal. It's not like we're assigning sites or anything. People count down the end. So the 16 teams max time the $20 per team. That's what we're doing a deal on.
Do you have Councillor Paulson? You can finish out.
Thank you. So I think if we're going to agree to that, then we also need to set a time limit on when they arrive, because in previous years, they've come and started setting up at on Tuesday afternoon and thinking that the whole team they want to get the best spots, right? And and the other thing is that we need to have a time limit so that anybody that is camping in the campsite knows that it would have to be vacated by Friday. So if we're giving the whole campsite out to the Oscar days.
CEO,
Yeah, I would just suggest a substitution of wording that not necessarily they would have to vacate, but if they're coming early, they would pay full price. Then for the tournament, they would receive the group rate, and then if they plan on staying longer, then they would revert back to the full price again. And I might just add, I appreciate Councillor Paulson's question around camping at the totem, in the sense that if we allow the totem to become a campsite, then what other areas in the village could also be construed as a campsite? So I'm sensing council wants to be flexible, but I think we wouldn't mind some definition of how far the campsite is stretching one way or the other, or is it over to the ball diamonds as well or not? So.
Councillor Bichette,
Yeah, I'd like to put a motion to accept the group camp fees as written, with the condition that the ball teams accepting the reduced rate for the group bring some non-perishable donations for the food bank to supplement that.
we have a motion,
I'll second that.
discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, it is carried. So we're going to put it in a, I assume it's going to be in a written document to the committee stating that any members from the teams that come prior to will pay full price. CAO?
Is the area by the totem included in the campground?
It has been for years. Correct? Yeah. Councillor Tinsley?
Can I just, I think the CAO has a very good point. I think it would be important that we define, most people, when I recall from the last time, they went a little ways down. They weren't actually parked right around the totem, but a little ways down into that area. So I would suggest we just kind of define what that is, and that there is no other areas for camping in the village. We just make that clear per the CAO's point, so people aren't camping right behind the bathroom that nobody knows about behind Diamond 2. Thanks.
Agreed. It should be designated to that area, to the park area there. CEO?
So are you asking the organizer that's present tonight to sort of supervise that?
I guess in the letter that states if they show before, they pay regular, and after they pay regular, and camping is only permitted within that area and not on the ball diamonds. There is some room on the back of Councillor Tinsley's lawn. But other than that, but that's $100 a night. Yeah, so we'll leave that to staff. We don't need a motion for staff to write that letter, correct? Nope. We went through two motions, correct? Okay. Anything else, Councillor Tinsley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The one other point that I recall we were talking about was around the placement of the porta potties being, a portion of them being down at that end near the totem area. So I think we need to have that in the letter as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so correspondence. It is the correspondence A be received. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Council reports of committees, mayor report, verbal. Everybody got the information on the proposed regional fire administrative support. You've all had an opportunity to read it. This is part 2 of the report that we had from before. To give you, put it in perspective a little bit, one of the things with, there's one of our areas in the SRD that had a $250 per home increase for their fire department. That they came up with this report. I think the maximum is going to be around 16 at this current time, $16. It's a regional service. As you saw, 60% goes into Campbell River. The other 40% is divided into the 7 others. There is a schedule in there that shows what their plan is in terms of when it's going to be implemented, when it goes to public, and all that under the schedule. It's the SRD has allowed me to defer this motion, and so I could bring it to you guys for a review, so you had an opportunity to look at it. And it'll be voted on tomorrow at the SRD. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Tinsley.
I just had a question. I think I understand all the voting in the terms of SRDs voting for it, and then if they go with it or vote for it, then does that mean each of the municipalities then need to vote their agreement with it, or is it just like the one vote there and then we're all in kind of thing?
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Burchett.
Yes, I'd like to know why we haven't heard from the local fire chief about what they have to say about this and how it affects our team here and our fire support in Sayward. So I found that missing from the report, and I think that's important to listen to our local fire protection people and what they have to say about it.
Well, one of the things that happened when this started over a year ago or longer, it was the former fire chief and deputy chief that went through most of the interviews and so on and so forth. Our chief is well aware of it and has had a few conversations with the SRD. You wanted to jump in? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the information I would provide council is that this is going to provide a value to the Sayward Fire Department, both the village department presently as well as the area department, hall number 2. What's being proposed are 2 new staff positions that will assist all of the fire departments with the basically the administrative stranglehold that they now sort of, experience with greater and greater regulation, greater and greater paperwork, accountability, etc. So it's a great value to the departments. It'll take a huge load off of the departments. It'll increase their capacities hall by hall by hall in terms of getting assistance with training, putting together training programs, helping with the various reporting they have to do, etc. Keep them compliant with WorkSafe BC, things like that. They're not a replacement of the village as us as a municipality, as the employer, but they'll be an aid. Chief Morgan is aware of this. He has, as the mayor indicated during the proposal phase of this, or not through the proposal, pardon me, through the assessment feasibility portion of this study, the previous fire chief was engaged and Chief Morgan has been engaged since. And of course, his hands are out looking to welcome the help. So it's not anything that council should be concerned about whatsoever. It's an SRD service that SRD residents will pay for, as the mayor outlined.
Yeah, it's Chief Morgan has definitely said they welcome the help because of the limited time that they have to do all the administrative stuff, the training and everything else. He is quite happy to receive that help. Any other questions? Councillor Paulson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question about the split. So 60 to Campbell River and 40 to the other 7
Correct.
regional districts. So is that on a per capita basis, or and I'm just curious about whether there is an increase in the funds that will be coming because I read in this report where there's a lot more regulations and things. They need equipment and training and follow, like right now they're working on WCB compliance from that note, that report that we got several months ago. And in order to comply, that takes a lot of work in order to comply to the all of the new what did they call it in here? The new fire
Standards.
of BC. So to me, it sounded like dollar signs. And so that's why I'm asking how it will be equitable. And we don't have paid volunteers, but Campbell River has paid fire staff. So I'm just curious about how that's all going to.
Well, there's
Well,
stipends that are paid to ours, right?
Mhm.
In terms of, you have 2 employees. And it is by capita because
Okay.
obviously
Yeah.
Campbell River has the largest population in that. They've guaranteed that the 7 communities outside of Campbell River, because they have 2 employees that are going to be doing it, are going to get the attention to bring everything up to standard without additional cost. So
Mhm.
the costs that you see are for those 2 employees and for them to implement all those
Okay.
things that they're doing.
But there's also the cost for the training and purchasing the equipment and that sort of thing. So
Well, the capital costs are generally something that happens regardless. Training, they'll come out and they're paid by the SRD, so you don't have an increased cost for training. That's part of their job
okay.
to do with the fire department. CAO?
Thank you. I would suggest that the administrative personnel that are being provided or that are being proposed here may not have all of the skills required to deliver every service. I think what I just heard sounds a little bit like a catch-all, like they're going to be providing everything and they'll bring everything up to compliance at no cost to the fire departments. That's not necessarily the case. The municipalities, so for us, we have our fire department. We're still responsible for working with the fire department to create an operating budget respective of their needs. So training needs, conference needs, equipment needs, etc. In the case of our recent WorkSafe inspection, we've had to purchase some equipment and some supplies to get up to compliance. Those type of expenses are expenses that we will still have to bear. Where now and in the future, where the administrative support through these 2 positions will help is ensuring that we are compliant with respect to WorkSafe so that we don't face any added fines, any other penalties that WorkSafe can hand down to us. And so our firefighters are trained, they remain healthy and safe in the act of their firefighting, et cetera. So right now, I think the discovery out of the feasibility study is that some of the fire departments are falling behind with respect to their administration, and these positions will help keep them up to date. Not necessarily to save operating costs, but to help the fire department stay compliant and ahead of the game versus falling behind.
Yeah, your cost, whether the service is there or not, is still the same. Right? You just have that extra support. So there's not if they weren't there, we would still have those costs to incur. Councillor Tinsley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add to these comments, there also should be and probably will be an administrative efficiency in certain of these services, like if we're talking about training and whatnot, where they're now dealing with a larger group, and so a better purchasing power, negotiating price on things. So that should be part of it. Okay, thank you.
It's in the
Yeah.
report.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to add that in because it's money matters.
Money does matter. So
Thanks.
they'll group by turnout gear and everything else. So that would save money. Councillor Bichette?
Thank you. Page 35, if you look at the uniform parcel tax rate, it says $14.15 per property. Now, you were saying that that will not be a charge or a cost to the Sayward constituents, but just the SRD constituents?
No, we're part of the SRD. So
Okay, so
every home,
okay. So we're contributing more money to the SRD when they're still not helping contribute money to the Kelsey Center. Okay, thank you.
okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? No. So council received the mayor's verbal report for information and discussion.
I'll move that.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second that.
I was saying, I would.
okay, discussion. All in favor?
That's where my hand was going.
Okay, there, sorry. Thank you. So fast. Opposed, seeing none, carried. Unfinished business, none. Staff report. For tax notice letter, everybody has a copy of what's sent out last year. So we have CAO. Did you want to talk on that, or you just want to?
I don't think I have anything to add
Yeah.
unless council has any questions. I'd be happy to answer, as always.
You got that sent out last year, went out with every bit, with every tax notice, so now's a good time to put information in. Councillor Tinsley?
I think there's some excellent ideas here. And just to recap, the general concept here is if we're going to send out a piece of paper, let's, beyond the basic property information, let's use the rest of that white space for as many things as we can, pretty much.
Saves money as well.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Councillor Tinsley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I gather we would look at some of these additional ideas to squeeze in beyond what's already, or on the last year's one. Would that be correct?
CEO?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Councillor Tinsley, yes, I mean, and time is of the essence here. I'm gonna look to the CFO for what's our targeted mail out date at this juncture of the night. What's our targeted mail out date now? Okay, oh, wow, so we've got more time here. I had written May 16th. Or no, we're still May 24th. Okay, we're, oh, wow, right in the middle of the 23rd to the 26th. Okay. So time is of the essence for council to, I mean, staff is willing, obviously willing and capable to help here, but we would need some direction as soon as possible.
Okay, Councillor Tinsley?
Can I make some suggestions and then we can go with that?
Absolutely.
My suggestion would be to create some space is to remove the extra garbage one from last year's because we pretty much promote that almost regularly in the letter. The alertable to create more workspace is not it's not new anymore, and it also is promoted in the newsletter. So that would create some space there. And my suggestion would be that in addition to those removals, we would add in the news about the economic coordinator, Canada Day promo. Didn't we do an introduction of the CAO already? I'm not trying to remember. No,
Mhm.
he doesn't want credit.
Not important, but I just wanted to add, we're not limited to, I don't think we're limited to one piece of paper, are we? I mean, it's all based on weight.
Yeah, costs will go up if you add.
Absolutely. So do you think we have? Okay, typically one piece of paper a day.
I agree with Councillor Tinsley to add those.
Perhaps there's other suggestions about ads, given the white space. If everyone agrees with those deletions, we have available. Otherwise, I think everything else is good.
Okay, Councillor Paulson?
Yes, thank you. I think also, along with Councillor Tinsley's additions or cancellations, that the Canada Day promo is also a full page ad in the Sayward Futures News. So, and that's usually sponsored by Sayward Future Society as well as the village, but it's also in the advertisement in the newsletter.
I don't think it hurts to put it in here as well. Because it is for the entire community. Go ahead, Councillor Bichette.
Thank you. So, new economic development coordinator, is that position been filled yet? So should we be putting that in something if that position is not filled yet? Considering the NIMO tried to, they got the same grant and they increased the wage up to over $100,000 a year and they still can't fill the position.
Councillor Tinsley.
Oh, thanks. I think that's an excellent point. We don't want to get people excited and then inflate the balloon, shall we say. But there are other ideas we can come up. Are there any other, I'm just gonna, blue sky, I call it here. Does anyone have any other ideas about, are there any other events that we have going on?
Well, it's also, but by putting in that we're looking, or the village got a grant is how we can put it. Through ICE-T, we received a grant for an economic development person.
Mhm.
Not saying that the position has been filled or so on and so forth, but we're giving an opportunity to promote ICE-T and say thank you.
Mhm.
And the fact that we've received this grant for an economic development person. So I would think that depending on how it's worded, it's justifiable by going in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to play off that idea, maybe what about the idea of including the various grants we've received, not just this one, you know, citing this is one, this is another. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Or does it make the village feel like we're suddenly rich and our property taxes shouldn't be going up at all?
No, I agree that it's a good idea to put in other things that we've been fortunate enough to. CEO, you were next, and then Councillor Bichette.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the mayor's wording that what we were looking to do here through the mention of the economic development coordinator is to, more than anything, raise some excitement around what I would refer to as sort of like the underground business community. You know, there isn't a lot of economic development chatter. So just by talking about the fact that there's an economic development grant that we've received and we're currently advertising for, and this notice is going to every property owner, just that, nothing specific, more general, but still at the same time enough to be able to create some energy around it.
Yeah, another thing is we also, a lot of people, there are people that do not get our newsletter. Because if they don't sign up for junk mail, they don't get the newsletter. Councillor Bichette was next.
Thank you. I think we should add something, even if it's a small little part of this, about food security and the 2 operating food bank programs in Sayward. I think that's important and it should always be highlighted.
I agree. Everybody else agree? Okay, so that should be enough information to fill the newsletter. Is that correct, CEO? CFO? CO? Anyone?
I would sense, yes, I would think we're there, and I'll prioritize the introduction of the CAO as the last item if there's space.
Okay, thank you. So recommended resolution that council receive the tax notice letter from resident staff report for information and discussion.
I'll move that.
Second,
I'll second that.
discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Emergency, none. Bylaws, none. New business, none. Question period, nobody's online. Nobody's here. Sorry, Councillor Tinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just wanted to we've voted on all those points we talked about, or we recorded those as part of that.
Yes,
That's all. Okay, good.
yeah,
Thanks.
they're writing it down. Okay, in camera, none. Adjournment. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
I'll second that.
Do we have Discussion. Counselor Gilligan? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you to staff. Again, thank you to our CFO and staff for that wonderful job.